Michael stood at the edge of his backyard, arms crossed with a sense of pride. For months he had been working with contractors, landscapers, and suppliers to make this day possible. The afternoon sun glistened across the surface of the brand-new pool, its crystal-clear water sparkling like glass. It wasn't just a pool to him, it was a dream fulfilled. He had always imagined having his own backyard retreat, a place where he and his family could relax, swim, and enjoy warm summer evenings without having to share crowded community spaces. His wife Emily brought out 2 glasses of lemonade and handed him one, smiling at the look of satisfaction on his face. "You did it," she said warmly. "It looks amazing." Michael took a sip and nodded. This is going to be our little escape. No noise, no interruptions, just peace. But peace wasn't something the neighborhood was known for, at least not with Karen around. Karen lived 3 houses down and carried herself as though she ran the entire street. She wasn't officially the president of the homeowners association, but she acted like she was. Everyone in the community knew her as the type who would walk around with a clipboard pointing out grass that was too long, fences that were the wrong shade of white, or cars parked an inch too close to the curb. Michael had mostly avoided her attention since moving in, but he knew it was only a matter of time before Karen turned her eyes toward his new project. Sure enough, it happened quicker than he expected. The very next morning, while Michael was arranging patio chairs near the poolside, Karen appeared at the gate, hands planted firmly on her hips. Her voice carried that familiar tone, half complaint, half declaration of authority. "Well," she said, dragging the word out, "I see someone has been busy." Michael forced a polite smile. "Good morning, Karen. Yes, we just finished the pool. My kids can't wait to use it." Karen leaned on the fence as if she were inspecting something suspicious. "You know, technically, pools fall under community amenity guidelines. That means you should have had this approved by the HOA before construction. Did you submit a request?" Michael set down the chair cushion he was holding. "Actually, yes. I filed the paperwork months ago and the board approved it. Everything is cleared." Her lips pressed into a thin line. I'll have to check my copy of the rules. You know, pools can attract a lot of attention. The neighborhood children might want to come over, and it's important to be fair." Michael caught the suggestion immediately. "To be clear, this is a private pool on my property. It isn't part of the shared amenities." Karen waved her hand dismissively, as though his words didn't matter. "We'll see about that." And with that, she turned and walked back down the street, her posture stiff but purposeful. Emily came out moments later, raising an eyebrow. "Was that who I think it was?" Michael sighed. "Yep, Karen's already making comments." "Don't let her get to you," Emily said, resting a hand on his arm. "It's our pool and we followed the rules. She can't do anything about it." At least that's what Michael wanted to believe. For the rest of the week, he and his family enjoyed their new pool. His kids, Lily and James, splashed happily every afternoon after school. Emily stretched out on a lounge chair with her favorite book. And Michael, for the first time in months, felt like his backyard was finally complete. But the peace didn't last. Late one Saturday morning, as Michael brewed coffee in the kitchen, he glanced out the window and froze. There, reclining on one of his lounge chairs like it was her personal resort, sat Karen. She had a towel draped across the chair, a pair of oversized sunglasses perched on her face, and a drink in her hand. Even worse, her sandals and bag were carelessly placed near the edge of the pool. Michael walked outside, trying to keep his voice steady. "Karen, what are you doing?" She didn't even flinch. "Oh, don't be so uptight. It's a hot day, and this is what the neighborhood should be about, sharing resources. You wouldn't want to be the kind of neighbor who keeps everything to himself, would you?" Michael's jaw tightened. "This isn't a community pool, it's private property. You can't just come in here." Karen adjusted her sunglasses, still lounging comfortably. "We'll see about that." Michael stood there, speechless. His dream of peace and privacy was already being tested, and he knew this was just the beginning of a battle he hadn't asked for. Michael had hoped Karen's bold intrusion that Saturday was just a one-time stunt. Maybe she was curious, maybe she wanted to make a point. Whatever the reason, he figured she'd gotten it out of her system. But as the days passed, that small hope dissolved quickly. On Sunday morning, Michael woke to the sound of splashing. At first, he thought it was the kids. He rubbed his eyes, padded toward the back door, and froze at the sight through the glass. It was Lily or James. It was Karen. There she was, gliding through the pool like she owned it, her hair pinned up with a bright clip, her oversized sunglasses perched on the edge of the deck. A half-empty can of soda rested dangerously close to the water, condensation dripping onto his clean tiles. Michael's chest tightened. He stepped outside, arms crossed, his voice firm but calm. "Karen, what are you doing?" She blinked innocently, treading water. "Morning, neighbor, just cooling off. It's already so hot today, don't you think?" "This is private property," Michael said, his patience thinning. "You can't just walk into my backyard and use my pool." Karen swam lazily toward the steps, completely unbothered. "Technically," she said, dragging out the word like she had rehearsed it, "the HOA rules state that neighborhood amenities should be shared. I don't see a problem. In fact, I'm setting a good example." Michael's eyebrows shot up. "A good example? Karen, this pool isn't listed under the HOA. I built it myself on my property. There's no shared access here." She stepped out, water dripping across the tiles. She reached for her towel, wrapping it around her shoulders as though she were at a community clubhouse. "Well, maybe it isn't listed yet, but don't you think it would be nice to let others enjoy it too? Not everyone can afford a private pool. You'd be doing the neighborhood a favor." Michael's jaw tightened. He had worked extra shifts, saved diligently, and filed every bit of paperwork to make sure this pool was his and his alone. And now here she was, speaking like he owed her something. "Karen," he said slowly, trying to keep his tone even, "this pool is not for the neighborhood. It's for my family. Please respect that." She gave him a dismissive wave, as though swatting away an annoying fly. "You're being selfish, Michael. I'll bring this up at the next board meeting. We'll see what they have to say." With that, she gathered her sandals and bag, strutting through the gate like nothing was out of the ordinary. Michael stood there, staring after her. His stomach churned with a mix of frustration and disbelief. He had expected neighbors to admire the pool, maybe even ask polite questions about the construction, but not this. When Emily came out a few minutes later, she found Michael still standing at the edge of the deck. She was here again, was she? He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Swimming in broad daylight like it's a public pool." Emily sighed. "She's going to be a problem." "I know," Michael clenched his jaw, "but she's not going to win this one." The week that followed only proved how determined Karen was. On Tuesday afternoon, Michael came home from work to find her stretched out on a lounge chair, earbuds in, humming to herself. On Thursday, she showed up with her grandkids, who squealed and splashed while she scrolled on her phone. Each time, Michael confronted her, and each time she gave the same smug smile and muttered something about community spirit. The neighborhood began to notice. From behind trimmed hedges and half-open blinds, neighbors peeked at the strange new routine. Some shook their heads in sympathy when they caught Michael's eye. Others quickly looked away, not daring to get involved. Michael, meanwhile, felt the edges of his patience fraying. He was a reasonable man, never quick to anger, but there was only so much boundary crossing he could tolerate. By Friday evening, he sat on the patio with Emily, his tone sharper than usual. "This isn't just about the pool anymore. She's ignoring my property line. She's ignoring my words. If I let her keep doing this, she'll think she has the right." Emily nodded. "So what are you going to do?" Michael stared into the shimmering water, the very thing he had worked so hard for, now tainted by her constant intrusions. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I can promise you this, I'm not letting Karen turn my backyard into her clubhouse." As the sun dipped low behind the houses, Michael felt the weight of the challenge ahead. He had thought the hardest part of building a pool was dealing with contractors and costs. But it turned out the real challenge was standing 3 doors down, armed with entitlement and a stubborn streak a mile wide. And Karen, he realized, wasn't going to back down anytime soon. The next week turned into a test of Michael's patience, one that stretched him far beyond what he had expected when he built his dream pool. What had begun as a few unwanted visits was now evolving into something bolder, something that felt like a direct challenge. It started on Monday afternoon. Michael was in his office on a video call when a sudden peal of laughter carried through his window. He muted his microphone and leaned forward, peeking outside. His stomach dropped. Karen was in his pool again, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 of her friends were with her, each with their sun hats and plastic tumblers filled with something cold and fizzy. They floated casually on pool noodles, chatting and laughing as though the backyard belonged to them. One of them even shouted, "This is way better than the community pool." Michael pinched the bridge of his nose, his frustration bubbling. He couldn't storm outside mid-call, but the knowledge that 3 uninvited guests were splashing in his pool while he tried to conduct business gnawed at him. By the time he was able to step outside, the women were already drying off, completely unbothered by his dark expression. Karen gave him her usual dismissive wave. "Don't glare at me, Michael. I'm doing the neighborhood a service. Everyone deserves a little break, don't you think?" He clenched his fists but kept his tone measured. "This is the last time, Karen. I mean it." She smirked, not even bothering to argue. "We'll see." By Wednesday, Karen had escalated again, this time with her grandchildren. Michael came home to find brightly colored pool toys scattered across his deck, water dripping from footprints that trailed into the grass. The kids were shrieking with laughter as they cannonballed into the water, while Karen sat in his lounge chair, sipping iced tea. Michael approached, his voice firm. "Karen, you can't just bring your family here." She looked at him over the rim of her sunglasses. "Relax, they're children. They're not hurting anyone. It's summer, Michael. Don't you remember what it was like to be young?" "That's not the point," he snapped, surprising even himself with the sharpness of his tone. "This is private property. You're trespassing, and you're teaching your grandkids it's okay to ignore boundaries." Her smile faltered for the first time. "You're making too much of this. It's just a pool." "It's not just a pool," he shot back. "It's my home, my property, and you are crossing a line." Karen stood then, wrapping her towel around her shoulders with exaggerated slowness. "I'll make a note of your hostility," she said coolly, "and I'll be sure to bring it up at the next HOA meeting." Michael could barely believe what he was hearing. She was acting as though he was in the wrong for protecting his own yard. By Friday, the entire neighborhood had taken notice. Some whispered to Michael in passing, their sympathy clear but muted. "She's always been like that," one neighbor said quietly. "She acts like she owns everything. Don't let her walk all over you." But sympathy did little to solve the problem. The truth was, most people were too intimidated to confront Karen directly. She had a way of twisting every situation until she came out looking like the reasonable one, while the other person seemed uptight or selfish. Michael, however, wasn't about to let her rewrite the story this time. Each unwanted intrusion only strengthened his resolve. That night, sitting with Emily by the poolside, he voiced his frustration. "She's not just being annoying anymore. She's deliberately ignoring me. The worst part is she's making it look like I'm the bad neighbor for wanting privacy." Emily reached for his hand. "You've given her chances, Michael. You've told her to stop. Maybe it's time to take another approach." Michael stared at the shimmering water, his reflection distorted by ripples. "I think you're right. If she wants to play this game, then I'll need to find a way to end it on my terms." He didn't know yet what the plan would be, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a pool dispute anymore. It was a battle of principle, a test of patience and cleverness. Karen thought she could walk all over him, but she had underestimated one thing. Michael wasn't a man who gave up easily. And if Karen wanted to keep escalating, then she was about to learn that he could escalate too, just in a smarter way. Saturday morning arrived with a stillness that Michael hadn't felt in weeks. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue across the neighborhood. For the first time since Karen had started intruding, Michael allowed himself to breathe deeply, hoping maybe, just maybe, she would take the hint and stay away. But the hope was fragile. Each day had brought a new surprise, and he couldn't afford to wait around for the next one. He had been patient. He had been polite. Now it was time to put things in writing. Michael sat at the dining room table with a cup of coffee beside him, drafting a letter. His words were firm but measured, written with the same calm professionalism he used at work. He explained, clearly and without emotion, that his pool was private property. He cited the exact section of the HOA bylaws that differentiated private home improvements from communal amenities. He made it clear that her actions, no matter how she spun them, were trespassing. When he finished, he placed the letter in an envelope and walked it down the street. Karen's house stood out even in the early morning light. The lawn perfectly trimmed, the flower beds lined in symmetrical rows, the mailbox polished as though it were a trophy. He slipped the envelope through her slot, knowing full well she'd find it within the hour. Emily raised her eyebrows when he returned. "You're really doing this?" "I've tried talking to her face to face," Michael said. "She laughs it off. This way she can't claim I wasn't clear." By mid-afternoon, his answer came. Michael was arranging cushions by the pool when the sound of deliberate footsteps reached his ears. He turned to see Karen marching across his yard without so much as knocking. She held the letter in her hand, crumpled like it had been squeezed into a fist for the past hour. "You've got some nerve," she snapped, waving the envelope at him. Michael straightened, meeting her glare calmly. "I was clear, was I? That pool is private, it's not for community use." Karen's cheeks flushed pink. "How dare you try to embarrass me with paperwork like this? Do you think the HOA is on your side? Do you think the board will back you up after the way you've spoken to me?" "I don't need the board to back me up," Michael said evenly. "The rules are written down and the law is clear. This is my property." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of water trickling from the pool filter filled the silence. Michael stood tall, refusing to be shaken. Karen, after a pause, gave a sharp huff and spun on her heel. She stormed toward the gate, her sandals slapping against the concrete. Michael exhaled slowly, watching her leave. Emily had stepped out during the exchange, her face pale with unease. "She didn't take that well," she said quietly. "No," Michael admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But she needed to hear it." That evening, Michael heard whispers at the grocery store. A pair of neighbors were chatting near the produce section, and he caught his name in the conversation. "Karen said he tried to threaten her with legal documents," one woman murmured, her tone conspiratorial. "She said he's trying to take control of the HOA." Michael felt heat rise to his face. She was twisting the story already, shaping it into something that would make her the victim. He finished shopping quickly and returned home, his mood heavy. Over dinner, Emily tried to reassure him. "People will see through her eventually. They know how she is." "Maybe," Michael said, "but she's not going to back down, not after this." He glanced toward the backyard, the pool shimmering under the moonlight. What had once been a symbol of relaxation now carried tension with every ripple. He had given Karen her final warning, and she had responded with defiance. Michael knew what that meant. She wasn't done. And if she wasn't done, then neither was he. Michael sat at the patio table long after the sun had gone down, staring at the calm surface of the pool. The water shimmered under the glow of the garden lights, but instead of peace, all he saw was the conflict brewing beneath it. Karen's words replayed in his mind. "You'll regret this." Emily came outside with 2 mugs of tea and set one beside him. "You're thinking too hard," she said softly, taking a seat. "I can't help it," Michael replied. "I gave her a chance to stop and she threw it back in my face. If I keep letting her walk in here, she'll never stop. She'll just keep pushing until I lose my mind." Emily sipped her tea. "So what's your plan?" That was the problem. Until now, he hadn't had one. He'd been reacting to Karen instead of staying a step ahead. But as he watched the pool lights shimmer across the water, a thought began to form. If Karen was going to keep ignoring boundaries, then maybe the best solution wasn't confronting her with anger, but letting her trap herself. "I'm going to make it so she can't deny what she's doing anymore," Michael said slowly. "If she won't respect words, then I'll give her actions she can't twist." The next morning, Michael drove into town and visited a home improvement store. He picked up a set of discreet outdoor security cameras, small enough to mount on the eaves of his house and near the fence posts. They weren't flashy, but they were high quality, designed to capture clear footage even at night. From there, he browsed through the garden aisle until his eyes landed on something that made him smile, a motion-activated sprinkler system. At first glance, it looked like any ordinary garden tool, but once hooked up, it could spray a powerful burst of water the moment someone stepped into range. He imagined Karen sneaking in confidently, only to be startled by a sudden jet of cold water. Finally, he purchased a floating pool alarm, a small device that rested on the water's surface and triggered a sharp noise when it sensed unexpected movement. It was normally marketed for families with children or pets, but Michael saw another use. By the time he loaded everything into the back of his car, a quiet satisfaction settled in his chest. He wasn't planning anything harmful, just clever deterrence that would prove his point. That evening, after the kids went to bed, Michael installed the cameras. He mounted one on the back wall of the house with a clear view of the pool, another angled toward the gate, and one near the corner fence that Karen often used as her entry point. He tested each feed on his phone, making sure the angles were perfect. Next, he hooked up the sprinklers. He set them along the side path that Karen favored, hidden neatly behind shrubs. With a few quick adjustments, he configured them to spray only when someone stepped too close to the pool deck. Lastly, he placed the floating alarm gently onto the pool's surface. It bobbed slightly, almost unnoticeable in the moonlit water. Michael grinned to himself. If Karen thought she could sneak in unnoticed, she was in for a surprise. Emily stepped outside as he finished testing the alarm. "You look proud of yourself," she said, folding her arms. Michael chuckled. "I'm not out to humiliate her. I just want to make it so she can't keep pretending this is normal. Once she's caught red-handed with proof, she won't be able to twist the story anymore." Emily gave him a cautious smile. "I hope you're right. You know she doesn't give up easily." "I know," Michael admitted, glancing toward the fence. "But this time I'm ready." That night, as Michael lay in bed, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. For weeks, he had been on edge, waiting for the next intrusion, the next argument. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was ahead of Karen instead of behind. The cameras were in place, the sprinklers were ready, the alarm was set. It was only a matter of time before Karen tried again. And when she did, she was going to walk straight into the trap he had built for her. Sunday afternoon arrived warm and bright, the kind of day that practically begged for a swim. Michael had deliberately left his car parked down the street, giving the impression he wasn't home. He wanted Karen to think the coast was clear. If his instincts were right, she wouldn't be able to resist another uninvited dip in his pool. From his upstairs window, he waited. The cameras fed directly to his phone, and he kept the screen open, watching each angle carefully. Emily peeked into the room and raised an eyebrow. "You're really setting a stakeout." Michael smirked, knowing Karen, I won't have to wait long. It didn't take more than an hour. On the camera near the fence line, Michael spotted movement. Karen slipped through the side gate as though she'd done it 100 times, towel draped over her arm. She glanced around, clearly convinced she was alone. Michael leaned forward, heart thudding with both irritation and anticipation. "Showtime," he muttered. Karen walked confidently to the pool, set her sunglasses on a chair, and dipped a toe into the water. Without hesitation, she slid in, sighing contentedly as though she were the rightful owner. And then the alarm activated. A shrill beep cut through the air, echoing off the fence. Karen yelped, spinning around in the water, searching for the source. What on earth? Before she could react further, the motion-activated sprinklers roared to life. Jets of water burst from the shrubs, drenching the pool deck. Karen scrambled toward the steps, shielding her face from the spray. The more she tried to run, the wetter she became. Her shrieks carried through the neighborhood. "Who's doing this?" Michael couldn't help the small chuckle that escaped him as he continued watching from the window. It wasn't malicious joy, it was relief. For weeks he had been at her mercy, and now, finally, the tables had turned. Karen, dripping and sputtering, stumbled toward the gate, but her escape wasn't quick enough. Several neighborhood kids, drawn by the alarm and her shouting, peeked around the corner. When they saw her soaked and flustered, they burst into giggles. One of them called out, "Mrs. Karen got sprayed." Her face turned crimson. "Mind your business," she snapped at the children, but that only made them laugh harder. By the time she reached the street, Karen looked less like the HOA enforcer she fancied herself, and more like someone caught in a sudden storm. She clutched her towel around her shoulders and stomped back to her house, water dripping with every step. Michael went downstairs, phone in hand, and joined Emily by the back door. She had heard the alarm and the commotion. "Did it work?" she asked, eyes wide. Michael held up his phone, replaying the footage of Karen's chaotic retreat. Emily covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. "Oh, she's not going to like that." "No," Michael agreed, smiling despite himself. "But that's the point. Now she can't pretend she's the victim. I have video proof." For the rest of the day, Michael felt lighter than he had in weeks. The tension that had built up inside him finally eased. He spent the evening with his kids, letting them swim while he grilled burgers on the patio. The pool, for once, felt like his again. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, he knew the battle wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to quietly accept defeat. Sure enough, at the HOA meeting the following Tuesday, Karen tried to spin the story. She stood before the group of neighbors, voice dripping with outrage. "Michael set dangerous traps in his backyard. He nearly hurt me. Water shot at me from all directions. It could have caused me to slip and break something. And that awful alarm scared the life out of me. It's harassment, plain and simple." Some neighbors murmured sympathetically, but others exchanged skeptical glances. Michael rose calmly, a small USB drive in hand. "I'd like to present something," he said. When the footage played on the screen, the room fell silent. Karen's confident entry, her leisurely swim, the alarm blaring, and her chaotic retreat, all of it was caught in crystal-clear detail. The sprinklers hadn't endangered her. They had simply startled her. The children's laughter in the background sealed the reality of the situation. By the end of the video, Karen's face was redder than ever. She stammered, That's not the full story." But no one seemed convinced. Michael didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself, and for the first time, Karen had no clever comeback. That night back at home, Emily squeezed his hand. "I think you finally got through to her." Michael gazed out at the pool, calm and undisturbed under the night sky. "Maybe, but if I've learned anything, it's that Karen never gives up easily." Still, for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to relax. He had set the trap, and Karen had walked straight into it. The lesson had been delivered. What remained to be seen was whether she had learned it. The HOA meeting had ended with a silence that spoke louder than any words. For once, Karen hadn't stormed out victorious or convinced the board to back her version of events. Instead, she had been left standing awkwardly in the middle of the room, sputtering excuses while the video replayed in everyone's mind. Michael returned home that night feeling a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. He hadn't wanted to embarrass Karen. He had only wanted peace. Still, the way she had squirmed when the truth came out gave him a sense of relief. The narrative was no longer hers to control. For a few days, things were calm. Karen kept to herself, her blinds drawn more often than usual. The neighborhood seemed lighter too, as if people felt a collective weight lift now that someone had finally stood up to her. Michael even noticed a few neighbors smiling at him in quiet solidarity, their nods carrying unspoken approval. But Michael knew better than to believe it was over. Karen's pride was her armor, and she had been publicly dented. That kind of humiliation didn't just vanish, it festered. By the following weekend, whispers started drifting through the cul-de-sac. "Karen says Michael doctored the video," one neighbor murmured while trimming hedges. "She's telling people he set her up." Another whispered over the fence. "She claims he rigged it all to make her look bad, says he's power-hungry, trying to take control of the board." Michael shook his head when he overheard these stories. None of them surprised him. Karen wasn't ready to admit fault. She needed another angle, some way to frame herself as the victim. It didn't take long for her to make her next move. Monday evening, Michael was in his driveway unloading groceries when Karen appeared, clipboard in hand, her chin lifted in defiance. "Michael," she said coolly, as though their last encounter had never happened, "I wanted to let you know I've filed a formal complaint with the HOA. Your so-called security measures are creating a hostile environment. Sprinklers, alarms, these things are unsafe. Someone could get hurt." Michael rested a grocery bag on his hip and met her eyes. "Karen, those measures are on my property, designed to protect my pool. The only reason you triggered them was because you were trespassing." Her lips tightened. "That's your version of events." "It's not just my version," Michael said evenly. "It's recorded proof, everyone saw it." Her nostrils flared. "The board hasn't made a final decision, don't get too comfortable." Michael didn't rise to the bait. He simply nodded, carried his groceries inside, and shut the door behind him. But inside, he felt the simmer of frustration. It seemed no matter how much evidence he had, Karen would always find a way to twist the story. Emily noticed his tense shoulders as he set the bags on the counter. "She cornered you, didn't she?" "She's filing complaints now," Michael muttered. "She's trying to drag this out, keep it alive. It's like she can't accept that she was wrong." Emily placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "The neighbors saw what really happened. They're not fools. Sooner or later, she's going to run out of people willing to listen." Michael wanted to believe that, but he also knew how persistent Karen could be when her pride was at stake. A few days later, the HOA board sent a notice. They had reviewed Karen's complaint and found no grounds for action. Michael's measures were considered reasonable as long as they remained on his property. The letter ended with a warning directed at all members to respect private property lines. When Michael read it, relief washed over him. For the first time, the board had formally sided with him, putting their decision in writing. He taped the notice to his fridge, a quiet reminder that patience and persistence paid off. Karen, however, reacted differently. That evening, Michael caught her standing at the edge of her driveway, arms folded, glaring at his house as if she could will it out of existence. Neighbors walked by, giving her cautious space. Some offered Michael subtle thumbs-ups when they passed, silent encouragement that he wasn't alone. The balance had shifted. Where once Karen had held the power of intimidation, now she stood exposed. People weren't rallying behind her anymore. They were tired of the drama, tired of her entitlement. One night, as Michael sat by the pool with Emily, he let out a slow breath. "You know," he said, "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted a place to relax. But maybe it took standing up to her for everyone to realize they didn't have to put up with her either." Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Sometimes it takes one person saying enough to change the whole tone of a neighborhood. Michael looked at the calm water, its surface glowing under the patio lights. For the first time in weeks, he felt like it truly belonged to him again. Karen might not be finished, but her grip on the neighborhood was slipping. And that, Michael thought, was a victory in itself. The weeks following the HOA board's decision brought a sense of quiet that Michael hadn't realized he'd been missing. The constant edge, the fear of finding Karen lounging by his pool or the dread of another confrontation, began to fade. For the first time all summer, he could sit on his patio in the evenings with Emily, listening to the gentle hum of crickets and the soft splash of water against the pool tiles, without worrying about an intrusion. But just as Michael began to relax, Karen made one final attempt to regain control. It happened on a Saturday morning, the kind of day when the neighborhood usually buzzed with lawnmowers and kids on bicycles. Michael was skimming leaves from his pool when he heard the sharp clap of high heels against the pavement. Looking up, he saw Karen marching down the sidewalk with her clipboard tucked under her arm and a small group of neighbors trailing behind her. His stomach sank. Whatever this was, it wasn't casual. "Michael," Karen called out, her voice carrying a rehearsed authority. "We're here to address the ongoing hostility you've created. It's time the community had a word with you." Michael leaned the pool net against the fence and folded his arms. He wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of looking rattled. "What hostility?" he asked evenly. "The one that ended when you stopped trespassing." Her face twitched, but she pressed on. "Your actions, your so-called deterrence, have divided this neighborhood. We all deserve harmony, not paranoia." The neighbors behind her shifted uncomfortably. One or two nodded faintly, but most kept their eyes lowered. They hadn't come to support her so much as to witness whatever spectacle she was trying to create. Michael let the silence stretch before answering. "Karen, harmony doesn't come from ignoring boundaries. It comes from respecting them. All I've done is protect my property. If you think that's hostility, maybe you should reflect on why you keep finding yourself at the center of conflict." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, her carefully prepared words faltered. It was Emily who stepped out next, joining Michael at his side. "Everyone here knows the truth," she said firmly, her voice calm but commanding. "They've seen the videos, they've heard the complaints. Michael hasn't divided this neighborhood. He's shown that people don't have to put up with being disrespected." A ripple passed through the group of neighbors. One by one, they began to straighten. A man at the back, George from 2 houses down, cleared his throat. "Karen, maybe it's time to let this go. We're tired of all the drama. We just want to enjoy our homes in peace." Another neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, chimed in. "He's right. You've been picking fights for years. It's exhausting. Michael's not the problem here." Karen's eyes widened as the words sank in. For once, the crowd she had counted on wasn't rallying behind her. They were siding against her openly without fear. Michael watched her carefully. He could see the exact moment the realization struck. Her grip on the neighborhood had slipped completely. She was no longer the self-appointed leader, but the instigator everyone was tired of following. Karen straightened her shoulders, tried to muster her dignity, and muttered, "Fine. If that's how you all feel." Without finishing, she turned on her heel and stalked back toward her house, her heels striking the pavement like gavel blows. The group of neighbors dispersed quietly, but not before a few of them came up to Michael. George clapped him on the shoulder. "You did what a lot of us wished we could have done. Thanks for standing up." Mrs. Wilson smiled warmly. "You taught her a lesson we all needed to see." Michael nodded, humbled by their support. "I wasn't trying to start a war, I just wanted respect." "And you got it," Emily said softly once the last neighbor had gone. That evening, Michael sat by the pool with Emily, the water shimmering under the glow of string lights. The air was still calm, the way it should have been all along. "You think she'll stay away now?" Emily asked. Michael gazed at the reflection of the stars rippling across the pool's surface. "I think she finally realizes she can't win by stepping over people, at least not anymore." Emily leaned against him, her voice gentle. "You know, it wasn't just about the pool. You reminded everyone here that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean being cruel, it just means drawing a line." Michael smiled. "And sometimes teaching a lesson isn't about punishing someone, it's about showing them there are consequences." The faint sound of laughter drifted from across the neighborhood as kids played late into the summer night. For once, Michael didn't feel like an outsider in his own community. He felt like someone who had earned his peace. The pool sparkled in the quiet, unclaimed and entirely his. And though Karen's shadow still lingered in the cul-de-sac, Michael knew one thing with certainty. She would think twice before ever stepping into his backyard again. Because some lessons weren't easily forgotten.